Welcome back, everybody. It's the AIX Higher Ed Podcast update for November 6th, 2025.
And we've seen a lot of continued build out. We're going to just flip through these kind of quickly, right? But we see that OpenAI's made another deal with Amazon for $38 billion multi-year deal for basically infrastructure and compute to continue to expand their compute capacity. Microsoft's investing at 3.7 billion in the AI infrastructure in the UAE, so it's not just the US.
And
And
Microsoft, I think in 24 hours, had $30 billion of new agreements between different companies, UAE being one of them. And so it's international, and they're just continuing to expand across the board.
This one I kind of actually double take myself before I read the article. It was a big article. 10,000 NVIDIA Blackwell GPUs increased Germany's AI capacity by 50%. And I was thinking, well, that's not even many GPUs. I was about to look for another article. I was like, I thought other people had like hundreds of thousands or millions of GPUs. And then as I read the article, you can see screenshotted here. It said, yeah, OpenAI is planning, over a million GPUs. Musk has hundreds of thousands in Tennessee. So this shows you really how slow the build out is in Europe. And the one other thing, in building these data centers, and we see it even when we discuss it with our own students, right? Especially in Virginia, there's a lot of kind of consternation. And here they're building one south of Ann Arbor, south of the University of Michigan, and there's a lot of opposition to it. So this is something we're going to continue to see. And in Saudi Arabia, and this will move us into our next topic. We talk a little bit more about what's happening in education, but Cisco and Coster are working on an initiative to advance not just AI research, but also talent development in Saudi Arabia. And I like that term, talent development. We keep talking about AI literacy and AI understanding and skills, but we need kind of investment in talent across the board.
And that moves us into this section talking about tools, students, and the creator economy. And talent development is certainly top of mind here as we start to look at how tools, sometimes you kind of wonder, is the frontier model able to really do what a human is doing? Here's a great example of one tool that is going to have immediate application.
Yeah, it's called Pamelly. It was just released by Google Labs, and if you have a workspace account, you can use this. They're not charging at least now anything additional. And I saw it, and then 3 days later, I started playing around with it, and I was like, oh my God, this is what it can do. And then on Monday night, I teach a class to an adults. Many have small businesses, and basically what this does is you just give it your website and it studies your website and it does two things with that. One, it draws in the photos that are on your website. Two, it picks up on the theme of your website. Like, what are you trying to promote? So one of my adult students is like, oh, I'm in real estate. And I'm always selling homes. And this picked up and it kind of created some themes, right? Find where your story begins. It's more than a house. I mean, he was like blown away and like super impressed. And I thought of a couple things, immediately. Like one, everybody's social media now, like your stuff's just gonna have to be better. You're gonna have to have more, and it's gonna really help you with marketing. He said, can we use these? So I downloaded them and sent them to him. He was pretty happy. But I tried it too, for this other group I'd been working with in New Jersey, a middle school public forum, and this is like look at these like communication skills. It shows one of their coaches, communicating with students, and then it's like foundational training, right? And then it shows some of the younger students on the website. So it's just like really adapted, picking up and not, coming up with marketing themes. So people talk about saving you time. Yes, it saves time. Like imagine had to generate like all these images and these ads for social media, but it's like added intelligence that's clearly helping you conceptualize themes and marketing slogans.
It certainly has to, you're going to have to up your game in social media. It really extends digital storytelling. Interesting that it takes an existing website. So obviously you already have to have that kind of set up, but it's not very far-fetched to think that they're going to be able to develop that website plan and those themes as well. Obviously they have the capabilities for it. This is a good way to incrementally offer these tools and to be able to see how they can be applied.
And then there's we've all heard the models, Sora, we talked about before, Sora video generation, and I think we're at VO 3.1 for Gemini. Well, you can generate like, 8, 10 second clips on each of these. But somebody created an AI called Pippet, where you can basically make your own commercials. And you can see all you have to do is put in a simple text prompt. You select your model, whether you want to use Sora. Some people say that's it's better for like kind of generating funny like shorts and just kind of things, and then VO for kind of excuse me, longer commercials. But as you can see here, it's pretty impressive. Right now, I believe they're only charging like $20 a month, so anyone can experiment with video, social media posts, or even commercials local that might play locally on television for themselves for almost nothing.
And it looks like some examples of that and some really very advanced social media content.
A new one that's out, and some people are like, "Oh, this upset people," and now people are saying like, "Okay," but some people are upset, but the ads really work, and they don't really cost very much money to produce. One thing, and if you turn the sound up or you go watch the full commercial, it really draws you in like emotionally. And I don't have a background in advertising, right? But it's like, okay, if you think about maybe what you're learning in school, what makes a good ad, right? That's something you could just kind of read about and learn, and then kind of create that with social media.
The other thing that was interesting about this ad that came out is that there were also a vocal minority that were kind of decrying it, saying, "Hey, this isn't that very good compared to a lot of the other video tools that are out there," which is shocking to hear that in just such a short period of time, something that would have been pretty groundbreaking or very different and stand out, have been novel a few months ago. Now people are looking at it and they're just kind of, that's not as great as Sora, or might not be as good as VO3. So their expectations have been increasing, certainly.
And Google has one that ads are humorous. That's one thing they say. Remember, this is about like I forget if it's named Turkey Tom or just the turkeys. He's looking for a getaway on Thanksgiving, right? So it's showing you how to use the Google AI tools to like kind of easily plan your escape to some tropical thing before Thanksgiving. So it's funny and it's really good.
Now moving on to universities and education, and lots of developments here as well.
Yeah, and the transition there too, like you think about, okay, talking to some college students about this, in our class, like, oh, like how could you make some money quickly? Like a lot of people don't know these tools exist, and they don't even know how to use them. And some of the people in my class, my adult class, were saying they'd pay a student easily pay $1,000 to make one of these commercials, right? And we're kind of moving into this area where some of the previous skills that we've been trying to develop may not have as much economic value. Like this paper called "Making Talk Cheap: Generative AI and Labor Market Signaling." It's basically talking about how writing used to be a signal, not just writing in general. You could say, okay, how strong is somebody's writing? But in terms of a cover letter for a job, that did signal certain things, kind of about an employee, their strengths, their weaknesses, their interests. And same with a cover letter for college, right? A lot of people were just past November 1st. They're the application time. I know a lot of people, students are struggling with their essays, right? And they're just saying that's not really much of a signal anymore because you can just create that with AI. And of course, college essays and cover letters to a degree, they're in a complete signal because people hire people to help them write them. I almost think like the college essay became a signal of how well you could co-write with an adult. But the point is that kind of some of these signals that we used to take powerfully or importantly have kind of declined over time, and maybe now with generative AI, really much of signals at all.
Then we get into the theme that Stefan had mentioned before in talking about talent development and preparation for today's workforce. Why do most workers feel unprepared? And it's because they really don't have that foundational set of AI literacy, but more importantly, the skill set to figure out how do you apply some of this literacy, how do you apply these AI tools in different ways. And so we'll see more and more stories like this talking about how we need to adapt and be able to prepare the workforce.
And I thought it was interesting. One of the things they really talk about was stuff, we've been talking about. What do they need? They need soft skills, communication, right? Collaboration, empathy, problem solving are more important than ever. And it again references this Harvard Business Review kind of article. But I mean, this stuff's been around for decades. And over the last few years, we've seen so much of it. And again, it's kind of relative. We're still hanging on, it seems, to 95% of the paper writing, but stuff's shifting to these other areas.
What's interesting about it is that even as this article is talking about how many employers would prioritize really technical skills. When they talked about soft skills, they used to kind of say, you have the technical background, and then you need the soft skills to be able to have as kind of the connective tissue with the business or with the salespeople or with the customer. So you could explain it to them, so you could interact with them, so you could understand and collaborate with them. And now it's a matter of understanding that AI is taking over a lot of the technical aspects, or at least has the potential to. And the soft skills are going to be central to what a human is able to do in that workplace, to be able to employ and use AI tools, as well as be able to implement them and figure out how to use them effectively.
And really, thinking last night, with Zohran Mamdani, winning the mayoral race, and I was listening to some of the commentary, right? And a few things kind of struck me out. Like it says, oh, he was popular on TikTok, but what he was really good about was kind of going on to the streets and meeting with people. And even before the election, I saw him. There was some thing he was out late at night, hanging out in the diner with like the taxi drivers and people working the late night shifts, and it kind of really was made me think. Yes, these human skills, right? They're super important. Yeah, there's TikTok. Okay, and there's even been a lot of commentary, about like, oh, like democracy's in trouble, like the oligarchs are going to come in and they're going to use the AI and they're going to manipulate us. And we know that Musk, wanted the other candidate to win, but I don't know if he tried, but the AI manipulation of the human didn't succeed in this interest. In this instance, was really important. Was developing these human skills.
The other thing that was really interesting about the Mamdani campaign, and this has nothing to do with whether or not you support him as a
Right.
candidate, it's recognizing that these people skills permeated throughout the campaign. He had some 90,000 volunteers, and there were a number of articles written about how Gen Z was looking for an antidote to loneliness. There were a lot of young people that didn't want to just be at home. They were feeling energized. They felt it was a chance to be able to be part of community, to make friends, to be able to participate. That kind of collaboration is something our students are yearning for. And so, an important lesson to take from this is that when provided the opportunity, students and young people, all of us really, but especially young people who are suffering from a loneliness epidemic and are feeling more disconnected than ever, are looking for those opportunities. And if we provide those in the classroom, we can use that as the foundation to be able to incorporate AI literacy, AI skills, but doing it with with that sense of humanistic inquiry and those human skills that are really important.
And just the one other thing, I noticed and I grabbed a screenshot of it. Somebody was saying that one thing that really helped him, especially relative to Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, was that he had a simple message. He just focused on like one thing: affordability, affordability, affordability. And the reason I bring it up here is because that's something people have been teaching for years in like political communication, right? So everyone's kind of cutting it kind of gets us against this idea. Well, the AIs are just going to replace everything. They're going to replace the professors. It's like, no, we have valuable things to teach, right? This kind of came back to like a lot of kind of common sense political campaigning, not like sophisticated technology, and then kind of reinforce the point that you made, like people want community. This we have professors and teachers have so much to offer students, especially when combined with the community that you're talking about. And this kind of gets to too, this just kind of briefly I'll mention it. It's called The Age of Deskilling, but the article, if you read it in the Atlantic, it's about more than that. I mean, it does kind of challenge like, okay, well, are students like reading as much? Are they kind of thinking as much? Are they relying too much on the AI? But it kind of just talks about how new skills are kind of becoming more important. And it talks about them like they're new skills. We just, like I said, we have people been talking about some of these skills for decades, but it's really kind of a shift in skills. And if education, we want to maintain our relevance, we're going to have to acknowledge that we need to shift skills, and we can do it. People are very good at teaching writing. We should the students should continue to learn to write, but also they can help the students develop other skills as well.
Yeah, we really need to reflect on what those skills are going to be that'll be important, that we value, that we want to make sure that we persist in teaching, and those that maybe aren't as high a priority anymore.
Yeah,
Then we also get into questions about what AI is capable of. And this story that Stefan shared talks about how now AI is writing so much of the content that's online, including, as we'll see in the next slide, a lot of the stories written in news publications and used by journalists. But it still ranks behind humans. It's not quite there yet in most cases. And it might be because of different models being used or the way the tools are deployed. But we need to recognize that this is starting to permeate it, and there might be some unintended consequences as a result. As mentioned, 1 in 10 newspaper articles are at least partly AI written, many times without readers' knowledge. And so that's certainly changing the way the content is generated, what we're reading, and how we're interpreting it, and what we think it might mean.
And this kind of, it kind of too, just even kind of how academics like produce and share knowledge. I saw this on LinkedIn yesterday. Somebody shared, I think, yeah, 18,000 papers on Google Scholar about the capabilities of AI that we're not even using like the current models, right? So they're saying like AI can't do this. GPT-4. Now you may say, well, what's the difference? Like they're, and then the media reports them as AI can't do this. They're shared as AI can't do this. I mean, GPT-4, like it didn't really use tools. Most importantly, it didn't use reinforcement learning, which is kind of the foundation of the reasoning models. And I'll show a couple other advances here we'll talk about in a minute. But publications are so far behind. As we know, we just finished a book, right? It took a year. It's going to be 13 months, right, from the time we even kind of had an agreement with the publisher to the publication of it. And these articles in these journals, even when they're pushing ahead to try to get them out, are taking a really, really, really long time. So I think that's another thing academia, needs to look at. It's like, what is the research and what is the publication process? You clearly want to have some review. You can't just, accept publish anything, right? But there needs to be kind of a way to speed things up. And it's not just in terms of AI, but it's impacting all the sciences and everything. This next slide, which you brought up earlier, or which you brought up, I was still, I spent too long on the last one, but we're seeing more like partnerships with these companies, right? Anthropic and Iceland announced one of the world's they're making it available for all teachers or nearly all teachers, and it's a pilot, and it's about using kind of education and using AI in the existing classroom, which I think is relevant, and I know Anthropic 4.5 is that model is now in Flint, which is similar to Magic School. So more teachers and students are gaining access to kind of the what we call the frontier models, which is good. And we also see it not just in the U.S. or there, but in Punjab as well. Like they're using it to teach, and this is a place. Some people worry, oh well, it's going to replace teachers. Well, in some places there aren't a lot of teachers, there aren't enough, right? So we're kind of getting that teaching done. Helped and supported, and in some places maybe the only way to do it. But it does kind of bring up these fundamental questions. I've always said there's kind of two boxes. There's like using AI to kind of do maybe more of what we do, maybe do it better, maybe do it faster, maybe in a way that helps the students learn a little bit more, save some teachers time. But to go back to what we previously talked about, it's kind of a little bit question begging, right? Like we have to really think about what we want our students to learn content wise, right? Where I don't think, and nobody is saying like they shouldn't learn anything they're learning now, but like what content areas maybe need some shift or different degrees of emphasis, and what skills do we want them to develop? But we just kind of hyper accelerate everything we're doing without thinking about why we're doing it and how it's going to help the students, right? Then we haven't accomplished what we need to accomplish.
I think that's why the Anthropic project, the pilot project in Iceland, is exciting, as well as this application in Punjab. It's moving away from just either hyperscaling, technology and moving in different directions. It's allowing some consideration of what it is that we value as instructors in our classroom. And in Punjab, doing this to be able to teach Punjabi is an important step to make sure that it's not just Western driven or focused on Western languages or just English in most cases, or even just Western cultural references, and thinking about how this could be used to support what it is that we've identified as important values within our communities. And that's something we really need to spend a little more time reflecting on and thinking about, and kind of fits into something that we've been discussing and advocating for is better judgment and evaluation of what it is that we value, what it is that we look for. And we need to teach that to our students because we don't do enough to instill in them an understanding of how do you determine what those values are, and then how do you evaluate output from AI or from group work as to whether or not it meets those values and those goals.
And
Interesting study about from Oxford here talking about how AI is reshaping the teenage brain. And, remember seeing stories like this when computers were introduced, when social media had come about, when you had devices. And always there have been changes in the way that it will impact the way you think, the way you engage with the rest of the world. And this one's really interesting that AI might be making students faster. They're looking for answers very quickly. Maybe they're processing some of that pretty quickly, but fairly shallow. And they're not going as in depth as probably we would like, and certainly not compared to previous generations. And that kind of makes sense because of the interface, the way that they're interacting with the content.
And it kind of brings, to almost sound like a broken record, it kind of brings us back to two things. Like, how do we need to adapt our instruction, right, to account for that? Like we kind of keep teaching like we wish their brains were developed differently or the way they used to be. And then we kind of are teaching in a way that, supportive of the past and not the way that they learn currently. And so, I think some adjustments there need to be made. But also too, how do we adjust to push that thinking, right? A lot of the assignments that are given now, they don't, you can just use the AI to complete the whole thing. So we need to kind of adapt to this reality and not just kind of complain about the changes. And it's going to keep the models, and we won't go into a lot of model advances, but there are a couple that are relevant to education. This one is talking about, we learn how it's kind of predicting the next word, but now this is coming out of China. They're able to predict kind of basically the next concept, right? So you have concepts coming together, which impacts all kinds of things, right? From energy efficiency to how people are interacting with the models, to like what types of hallucinations you're getting or reductions in there. And, that's really improving. And, on the next slide, you'll see some really kind of, this is an article 42, swarm interference with peer rank consensus. It sounds like super technical and complicated, but it's not really. It's just saying like, okay, basically what they found was that they have a whole bunch of models, even smaller models work together, not even the frontier models, that increase the accuracy essentially of kind of the information that's provided over all the frontier models, right? So again, that's one thing that we're always like criticizing the models for. Oh, we make mistakes. I think we need to talk about, well, a whole episode on that. I've been working on something, but I don't think the future of education is AI error correcting, but the model's just going to continue to improve. So we can't just kind of focus on, their weaknesses from 2024.
And it's also interesting. It's not just that they're continuing to improve on the frontier level, where it's a new, bigger, more advanced model, but the applications of smaller models, swarm inference being an excellent example of this, or finding ways that they can start working on instead of discrete tokens, but thinking about concepts to be able to deploy the tools in very different ways that are more efficient, probably more actionable, getting better output as a result. We're continuing to see development across the board and in lots of different directions.
And that just shows you the top in the blue, right, is the swarm versus kind of these leading frontier models.
And now on to robots. Some interesting developments. This one is one competitor to Tesla's Optimus is a new model. I think is it X1, I think is the company, or 1X that has come out with this, and they're offering a subscription of $500 a month. And they're saying that they'll be available in early 2026. One of the concerns, though, is that most of the capabilities in terms of autonomous action are yet to be realized. They aren't ready for much of that yet. So it can operate in a few things autonomously, very limited, but then they have a human controller for more advanced moves. So there are questions as to how long will it take before that gives them the training data so they can incorporate it autonomously. obviously just an early step. Only the earliest of adopters would be thinking about this at this stage, but it does show the capabilities of a $20,000 robot that could come into the home and can start to incorporate some of the actions that you would like it to be able to take.
And it also kind of it kind of gets at the idea. People are like, wait, they want this model in my house so they can train it, right? And it's going to violate my now it's in your home, right? We kind of talked about like, okay, how much information you're sharing with the chatbot and it's learning. We go into that another day, but now it's visual, right? So a lot of privacy. The jobs we talk about this. This one, we had kind of a particular story we had brought up before. I forgot to add it out, but just kind of continuing kind of jobs. If you just kind of quickly on the next slide under the challenges, there's one new thing with IBM. They're kind of laying off 8,000 people, but in some of these are arguably due to AI replacements. And I always hate to, we kind of, I said last week, we kind of end on a negative, but I kind of bring up the jobs thing a lot. There's a little debate like, well, how many jobs and, how the replacement, there's obviously other problems going on in the economy, but there's at least some job replacement happening as a result of AI. And it's pretty clearly slowing down hiring of people who are graduating from college, right? Which creates challenges for our students. And so I do think it's important, but I also kind of hope that, to go back to really what we talked about earlier, there's no silver bullet, but there are kind of like signals in the market as to what's being valued. And I think, as educators, we need to react to that and, give our students the best chance in what's going to become, a hard economy or even help them to be creators. Like we talked about, that's why today I thought we should spend some, time on these ads and these ad development tools because as many students may not have jobs, but they may become creators.
And it's also something that if we just stick to the old concepts of what a job looks like or prepare them for an economy that existed in previous years, we're doing them a great disservice. The World Economic Forum report at the beginning of 2025 talked about 90 million jobs being disrupted and being lost. But there were also an indication that 170 million jobs will be created. And those are new jobs. They're new applications, maybe not entirely new, but certainly incorporating new workflows, different tools, different applications, different ideas, different foundational skills that you would have from a current worker. So lots of stories of people getting laid off because they haven't found a way for that person in that traditional job or in that way that job has been done to be able to easily be shifted over. But we have a chance to be able to prepare our students with the foundational skills, the durable skills, the AI literacy, so they can go in and take over those new jobs as they're being developed. It's going to be a really scary time in the economy as we go through that transition. The silver lining to it is that we do see where it's going, and we do see that there are certain skill sets that we can equip our students with that will help them get to that better job and that new job a little bit later. It's just a matter of making sure that we adapt. And maybe this is the other way to think about it, is that in the way that we see this disruption happening in the workplace, that disruption should also be occurring in our classroom and in institutions, K-12 and higher ed. Not that I'm saying that we should be laying off workers, but we need to reconfigure and reconceptualize what it is that we do. And part of that is starting with identifying the values that we think are important. What are the skills that we think we really value? What do we think we want our students to have? And we have to keep an eye looking forward to figure out how do we better prepare them. Often we think as educators, we just want to make sure that we're teaching them how to think critically and be good citizens. That's incredibly important. But we also need to prepare them for jobs. We have to prepare them for an economy. And we have some glimpse as to what that's going to look like over the coming years. And we have a responsibility to better equip our students to meet that.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, Stefan. This is
Thank
great. We'll
you.
see you all next week with the next update.